Hello and welcome to this Skill Me Up expert talk on why cloud, understanding the cloud value proposition. Hello, my name is Jonathan Tuliani. I'm the Managing Director in Europe for Opsagility, the Azure training experts behind skillmeup.com. Prior to joining Opsagility, I spent nearly 10 years in Microsoft, most of it in the Azure product group, where I was the program manager for the Azure DNS service and the Azure Traffic Manager service, as well as contributing to various other Azure features. I'm one of the co-authors of the Microsoft Azure Administrator Exam Reference Guide for the AZ-103 exam, and I'm a Microsoft Certified Trainer. Here at Opsagility, we provide a variety of services helping people be successful in the cloud. So we provide instructor-led training from our expert in-house instructors. We can use Microsoft official curriculum for certification classes, and we also have our own custom and advanced classes for business leaders, advanced architects, and developers, and so on. We provide interactive workshops, hackathons, you name it. Everything in Microsoft Cloud training, we can deliver. So for more details there, contact sales@opsagility.com. We also have on-demand training through our online portal, skillmeup.com. This has hundreds of expert classes, certification track classes, in-depth videos, and also includes a lab platform, so you can do hands-on labs in real Azure subscriptions that we provide for you. That's all included with your subscription. We have unlimited access for individual, team, and enterprise accounts, and you can find out more and start a free trial at skillmeup.com. Also, in the current COVID environment, we've been doing a lot of work in building a new service called Virtual Conference Manager. This allows you to organize virtual versions of all those conferences that you may have done on site. So it supports multi-day, multi-track, multi-session scheduling, breakout groups, workshops, coach assignments, you name it. So whatever you've been doing in your traditional in-person conferences, we can replicate that in an online environment at small scale or large scale. We've done events over 1,000 attendees and larger. This is all built on top of Microsoft Teams, and we're providing a powerful scheduling and organization management tool on top of that. Okay, so for our agenda, let's talk about why cloud. We just have one bullet agenda here. We're going to talk about why cloud, understanding the cloud value proposition. The first thing here is why cloud? Why is this question, why cloud, so important? Why do we think that's so important? And really, let's talk about this first, because this is critical. It's very important that you do invest in understanding why you want to move to the cloud, and I'm going to explain why that is. So the first thing is to say, look, there's lots of parts to the value cloud proposition. We'll see this on the next slide. There's many reasons to go to the cloud. There's lots of different benefits you can get from the cloud. And different organizations have different goals. Not all of these benefits are going to be interesting to you. Maybe some people go to the cloud because they want access to a particular service. Maybe there's some big data or machine learning service they're particularly interested in. But another person doesn't care about that. They're doing it to take advantage of some security and compliance certifications. And someone else is doing it because of the global reach of the data centers. And someone else is doing it for enhanced agility. Someone else wants to reduce their on-premises costs. There's many different reasons. Some different organizations have different goals, and they're seeking different benefits. So it's very important that you articulate clearly within your organization what your goals and benefits are. And that's key, because if you don't have clarity around these goals, then within your teams, different people are going to be pulling in different directions, just like in the picture. So you're going to have endless debates. You're going to have conflicting opinions, lack of focus, frustration. It's inefficient. This is the problem you get if people are not lined up on the same vision for why you're actually doing this. It will affect all the downstream day-to-day behaviors from that point onwards in your cloud adoption. And cloud adoption is a big change, and it's a hard change. So the last thing you need is to make it more difficult. And the other thing is to appreciate that these goals can change over time. Once you've defined those goals, you want to be revisiting them maybe every year, revisit, say, okay, we've achieved those things now, but now we're in the cloud and we have these new opportunities. What do we want to take advantage of next? What's the next phase of our cloud adoption journey? And then think of it like that. It is a journey, and you will want different goals at different times. So make sure this is a living goal, a living objective that you're working towards. So your cloud strategy, it should be explicit about your cloud goals and also about your non-goals. When something is a non-goal, call it out explicitly as a non-goal. If you're not looking to take advantage of big data scenarios, call it out explicitly, because that way, again, you just keep people on the same page. You can close down those discussions more quickly. Make sure everyone in your team is clear on the strategy and the rationale behind it, because when people understand it, they're more likely to accept it. When people understand it, they find it easier to remember it. When people understand it, that's where people can move forward and work towards achieving that strategy. So let's look at the cloud value proposition itself, and this is the bulk of this. The bulk of this entire presentation is really in this slide. It's like a 2-slide presentation, really. So the cloud value proposition, I break it down into these 4 main pillars, and I'm going to walk you through those 4 pillars one by one. And the first of the pillars is everything to do with cost. And now let's have a look. What do we mean by cost here? There's various aspects to the cost dimension. And the first is what we call CapEx to OpEx. And this is accounting speak. CapEx is, of course, capital expenditure, and OpEx is operational expenditure. And from an accounting point of view, within an organization, these are handled differently. They're different budgets, and there can be legal restrictions even on how you move money from one of these buckets to the other. So your capital expenditure is your upfront spend. It's the assets that you purchase. So traditional IT has typically got a significant CapEx element. This is the expensive IT hardware that you're buying upfront. And then OpEx is your operational expenditure. It's your keep the lights on expenses. It's your electricity bill. It's staffing costs. It's all the things that are ongoing, day to day, week by week, month by month costs that you have. And with the cloud, of course, everybody's probably familiar by now, you have this significant shift typically from CapEx to OpEx, where you have existing expenses on traditional IT in the capital space. Those move into the operational space when you have this CapEx OpEx shift. So people are familiar with this, and this is something that your finance teams need to be aware of. You need to think about in terms of how you change your cloud budgeting processes, your IT budgeting, how managers think about how they track and manage costs. It can be quite a significant change to processes within your organization. So that's the first thing. And for many organizations, this is a good thing, because by having the costs aligned with their OpEx, it brings it closer to the value that the cloud, that the IT cost is bringing to the business. The IT cost can be squared up very closely with the business benefit that the IT cost is bringing. As you're delivering more services, the costs may go up, but of course those services bring more value, and you can see the relationship there much more closely. So that's normally a good thing that these match together. Although in some cases, some industries are reverse to operational expenditure and prefer capital expenditure. An example was given to me sometimes in the telecoms industry. What are they all about? They build this infrastructure, they put up cell phone masts and lay cables and whatever, but then they want the operational cost of an individual telephone call to be as near to zero as possible. So it depends on the industry you're in whether you want to be in the CapEx or OpEx side here. So be sympathetic to that when you talk to people in different industries regarding the cloud. Second one here is transparency, and we touched a little bit on this already. So what I mean here is, think about traditional IT. You might have a data center, you're running 1,000 servers in that data center. So for the different business units using those servers, you basically peanut butter the costs of that IT facility across those business units. If this business unit is running 500 servers, they're going to get half the cost. This one here with 200 servers is going to get 20% of the cost, and they get cross-charged on those costs. And it's a standard model that's very widely used. Now, the challenge with that is, of course, it's a very coarse approach. It's a perfectly reasonable approach. I mean, I'm not criticizing anyone for having taken that approach with traditional IT, but it does have its drawbacks. In particular, you don't have very good control from business. The motivations as a business to really try and save are not so good. So if one of those business units, they're running 200 servers and they cut 20 of those servers, so, well, it does mean, of course, that they're only going to get cross-charged for 180 servers now. From their business unit point of view, there's going to be a saving. But the reality is those 20 servers still exist. They're probably still powered on, and they're probably still patched every month. Maybe someone else picks them up and uses them for something else. Maybe they don't. Next time around, even if you get rid of them, you're just going to peanut butter your IT costs across 980 servers instead of 1,000 servers. And there's no real saving to the business as a whole. That business unit may have saved some money, but the business as a whole didn't really save very much. Whereas with the cloud, of course, you get an individual itemized bill for every little thing that you do. So you can tie that back to the business. You can create the reporting. You have to make the investment, but you can create the reporting that ties your cloud spend right back into the business and exactly what that business is doing. So with that, you can you can provide this clear motivation for the business that they can see, well, these are my costs, and they can start getting involved there and talk about how the business decisions they're making, maybe the level of redundancy they have or the scale of the service they're offering, how that can maybe be trimmed back, meet the business needs but cut back on the cost. They get this. They can get involved directly in how the costs are reflecting the value delivered. So that's a great transparency, that fine-grained reporting that you get. So this is all a good thing. The last one here is cost savings, and perhaps this is the most controversial bullet on this whole slide. Many people come to the cloud thinking, "Oh, we're going to save money. We're going to save big time on because we're no longer be running all this IT for ourselves." And what some people are then shocked to discover is that, well, actually, they're not saving money. Actually, the cloud can be quite expensive. Actually, if you look at some of the services in the cloud can be very expensive, and you might end up spending far more than you're spending, today. So it's important not to be naive about the costs in the cloud and to make assumptions that the cloud is always going to lead you to cost savings. Microsoft has a page in the documentation, in fact, on common fallacies of cloud adoption, and one of them there is that cloud is always cheaper, because it's not. But the thing to do is to make sure you're making fair comparisons. Firstly, with your on-premises costs, it's much more than the cost of those servers. You've got to think about the people costs, the insurance cost, the building cost, electricity. You've got to look at the fully loaded costs of running your traditional IT. And those can be quite substantial. The costs that are associated with that. So first thing is, make a fair cost comparison. And the second thing is, when you think about the costs, is to also look at the value that you're getting. If you were simply making a drop-in replacement for your existing IT, then sure, you could just look at a cost by cost comparison. But the cloud is much more than a drop-in replacement. This is why we have these culture changes. This is why we have the other three panels on this slide we haven't talked about yet. The cloud doesn't just replace your IT with something that does the same way. It enables you to do a whole lot of new things and enable you to do a whole lot of existing things much better. So the value of the cloud is far more than a drop-in IT replacement. It has huge value beyond just the replacement value. And if you're going to think about the cost savings, if you're simply assuming that the value is the same, well, then you're missing a big part of the value prop, right? You're not making an apples for apples comparison. Maybe the cloud is costing you a little bit more, but maybe it's delivering for you a whole lot more. So in that sense, you've got to look at the big picture of the cloud and understand, the value that it's delivering, and not just focus purely on cost savings. Advice that many of the big cloud vendors have with their sales teams is, look, don't go in pitching this on cost. The value is much bigger than cost. Don't look at this as a cost saving value prop. Some people do get good cost savings out. I'm not saying it can't be done, but don't assume it will happen, and make sure that you're seeing the bigger picture when you do think about cost savings, both on the cost side and on the value side. That's very, very important. Okay, so that's our cost saving piece there. That's our cost pillar that we need to think about. Let's have a think about the next pillar. Next pillar I have here that I'd like to think about is agility. This is one of the big things that the cloud brings. I remember doing a traditional IT project in the early 2000s, and we were delivering for a major bank in the UK was the customer, and we were going through the project. Maybe it was a 6 or 7 month project, and early in the project we'd had to provision new IT, new hardware for the servers and the networking and so on. And we had a very detailed spec that laid out the exact requirements, and we'd chosen the servers and the networking gear and all the different networking settings that need to be done, which ports need to be open, and so on and so on. Everything was done in each environment, the development environments and the test environment, staging and pre-production and production and so on. So all these environments are all laid out. Everything was spec'd and reviewed and signed off and gone out to the IT team to provision that. And in the meantime, the project was continuing with integration work and so on. And as we come to the end of the project, 4, 5, 6 months later, we're coming into the deployment phase, and everything was fine in the development environment. Tests are passing, also good. We're moving into the test environment and the staging environment. And then it came to the production deployment. And there we realized we had a problem. There was a port on the networking settings that had been missed. There was a port that needed to be open in production that wasn't open. So, of course, we had to do a change request. We say, okay, yes, we missed that, and we need to open this port, please. Thank you very much. Easy to justify, easy to get signed off. It was very much just a slip on the specs. Of course, the specs had all been reviewed by multiple people, and people miss it, right? Humans make mistakes. So the specs had been reviewed, it had been missed, and we're just asking for this change. And the response comes back, yes, that's fine. That'll be 2 weeks. 2-week SLA on any networking change. Great. And that just blew our schedule. That was it. The project went late. There was no way to work around this 2 week limit with the they could do high price things for live side issues. They could do high price tickets, but you couldn't get a high price ticket for a new deployment. And that was it. It blew the schedule, and the project shipped late. Because of a slip a mistake that had happened 6 months earlier in speccing the design. And this is traditional IT. This is how it works. Now, not everyone has a 2 week SLA on opening a port, but the nature of traditional IT is that it's just very fixed. And when things happen, and things always will happen, when things happen, it doesn't adapt well. And this is what the cloud really helps to address. The agility is so much better when we move into the cloud. So the first thing, of course, is you have this instant provisioning. You have this ability to provision the hardware and networking, instantly or near instantly, and also to make changes instantly or near instantly. So you can just be much more dynamic, and you don't have to be. This again results in a culture change if you want to take advantage of this. You don't need to now plan this stuff months in advance. You should take a much more agile approach, so you can do things in a much more agile way. You start with a proof of concept, you iterate on it, you thrash it out, you find the issues, you move forward. You can be much more reactive rather than having to be proactive and planful, and that enables you to be much more adaptable to change. Allows you to, and also it's just more efficient. It's just less work. You don't have to do the detailed planning and reviews and so on that I just talked about. You can just skip all of that stuff. You can just go in. You just still have your diligence. You have your planning. But you go in with a proof of concept. You work things out in production, and then when you are finalizing things, and things are ready to go live, you're doing so with a lot more confidence. You can just do it all much more efficiently. So with the right process changes, you can become much more agile and much more efficient in how you provision your IT. The second thing, as I say, is these process changes. They really go beyond how you deploy the IT from an IT department point of view, from an operations point of view. You can bake this right the way back. Shift it left all the way through the cycle. So now you're thinking about, well, how do we even develop our software in the first place? The cloud, because of this agility, enables you to go to DevOps processes. So your Dev and Ops team are now one team, and they've got soup to nuts ownership all the way through this process, and they can use techniques, continuous integration, continuous deployment. These can be done outside the cloud, but with the cloud, they become much easier, much very straightforward things to deploy and manage. So you can have that team delivering value on a very iterative process, getting our value out to the customer, and it's just a more efficient way to work. Your people are spending less time on busy work and more time delivering value for the business. You just get more done when you work in these modern ways. Following the same theme here, you can move your application development to take advantage of many of the higher level cloud services, moving towards platform as a service, moving towards maybe serverless deployments, and using many of the canned services that are available in the cloud for monitoring, for example, for analyzing data, for monitoring streams of data. You name it. There's many common scenarios where there are now canned cloud services that you can just consume rather than having to build everything yourself, from the infrastructure upwards. So these modern applications are you're writing your business logic, you're trying to run it in a platform service which you no longer have the patching overheads. You can just scale with a slider rather than having to think about any fundamental changes in your architecture and networking and so on in order to scale. Everything becomes much faster, much more efficient, allowing you basically to spend your team spend their cycles on the business logic, on delivering value for the business, and spend a lot less time on the underlying IT issues. Again, more efficient, you get more done. And what this enables, of course, is faster time to market. It enables you to be much faster with the issues that you need to fix in terms of getting fixes to market, and much faster with getting new features to market. And this, of course, is a critical piece of the value proposition. And this is a great example of what we talked about earlier when we looked at cost savings. Is don't just look at the costs. And don't assume your deliveries are the same. The value is coming, in part from being able to do much more than you could with traditional IT. Let me give you an example of this switch to DevOps and the faster time to market. I taught a class roughly a little bit less than a year ago, and it was a class in Spain a 4-day class for Microsoft partners teaching how to use various Azure technologies. And one of the days of this class was all focused around migration, and we were using the Azure Migrate service, which is a great service. If you haven't looked at it, then that's something you should look at. So as I was preparing for the class, a couple of days before, I was just running through. There's a very long hands-on lab that students were going to do as part of this lab, where they get to come in and do a real migration of an on-premise application running in Hyper-V in this case, and they get to do a step-by-step migration, and then they finish the lab with the whole application migrated. The database is running in a database service. They've migrated Windows VMs and Linux VMs, and they have the whole stack running as a migrated application in Azure at the end. And it's several hours for this. And what I found as I was preparing, and I was just checking that everything in the lab was working, I found that there was a bug, and there was one step where you were blocked. So there was a part of the UI in Azure wasn't behaving the way I expected. Now, I have a relationship with the Azure Migrate team, so I reached out to them and I pointed out this issue. I was able to give them enough information that they were able to reproduce the issue, and they could confirm that it was a bug on their side. It was fortunately just a bug in the Azure portal experience for Azure Migrate and not the underlying service. So they were able to ship me a fix. They were able to identify the issue and fix it, and give me a private link to their preview portal with a fix the same day, and assure me that the fix would be through to production the day after. And that's fantastic. When a bug was flagged to them, they could get an investigation and they could ship a fix in a day. And with traditional IT, it's very hard to do that. Typically you just can't do that. Your cycles, your ship cycles and your test cycles can be weeks long. You just don't have that agility. Whereas here, because they've moved to DevOps processes, because they had the CI/CD, because they're building in a modern way, they're able to see, okay, here's the issue, here's the fix, and they're able to ship that through into production in a very agile way, a very quick way. And that delivered real value. It meant that I was able to go into that training class where I've got a classroom full of students, and we were able to do that. We weren't blocked, and how many other customers are benefiting from that? And it's not just this one bug. The entire organization in Azure is working in that way. When I mentioned at the beginning, I used to work in the Azure group, and when I started out in the early days of Azure, this is the year before Azure even had a virtual machine, Azure didn't work that way. It wasn't that agile. It took much more time for us to ship. And over time, Azure became more agile. It became much more DevOps centric. Dev and test disciplines merged, and the operations discipline merged to become a much more of a DevOps organization. And these, I recognize, these are painful changes for an organization to go through. And we went through our own pain as part of this journey. But you can see the value paying off when a few years down the line, you get a bug and you ship out the fix the next day. I mean, that just wouldn't have been possible if the organization hadn't made those strategic decisions years earlier to migrate from waterfall development into agile development, to migrate into a DevOps team. Those strategic investments in the organization culture and in the processes, and taking those hard choices years earlier, they show up in the agility the organization has later on. Not just in that one bug fix, but how many other bug fixes across the hundreds of services that are available in Azure. How many times does this happen? It's happening all the time. So as an organization, there's a huge benefit when you look at the scale at which this organization is working at, and the agility. When you multiply that kind of agility across an organization of this size, you see that there's a huge benefit there in terms of delivering more quickly out to the market. Let me give you a second example here, and this is one that really shows how it can improve not just the time to market, but also the quality. This is something that sometimes people feel is they think, oh, if we move to these agile processes, we're going to have to cut down on our testing. The quality won't be as high. And I disagree. I believe the quality will be much higher, not just because when a bug occurs, you can fix it in a day rather than that bug sitting there for 3 months before it gets a fix. But you can actually ship initially with a higher quality. You can actually just drive a completely different culture of quality by working in more agile ways. So for this example, look at the Azure documentation. If you go to docs.microsoft.com and you look at the Azure documentation, you'll be able to see from the little links at the top right that all of this documentation is actually written using Markdown files on GitHub, and it's in a public repo. So people can file bugs against the documentation. Hey, if you see an issue in the documentation and you know what the solution is, you can even file the fix. Microsoft will approve it and they'll publish it, and typically it publishes out to production twice a day. So you can submit your own pull request if you have a fix. You can submit a bug if you see an issue. They're very lightweight documents written in this markdown format, very easy to edit, very quick to update. That's fantastic. And when I worked within Microsoft, we saw this change. Prior to this, the early Azure documentation was all on MSDN, and the process here was very, very onerous. Documentation would be written in Word documents. These had to be handed over to a separate team who would do reviews, and then they went across to another team who would onboard them into the site, and it would take weeks. And if you had new features that you were going to ship, you'd have to work weeks in advance to work with these other teams to write documentation and get your documentation onboarded. And if you saw a typo late on, it's a very onerous thing to fix. Very, very difficult. Very, very cumbersome. Very inefficient. Lots of unnecessary meetings to hand over from one team to another. More people involved than should be. It's just painful tools to use. It's just not efficient at all. So when they made this big shift across to the docs.microsoft.com site, they didn't just say, okay, we're putting the content on a new site. They changed the underlying process. The new site is a cloud-based site. Okay, it's not Azure, it's GitHub. But underlying this is still the fundamental shift to a cloud-based service to underpin that application. And as part of that, they also reinvented their processes. So this is, again, it's all about the cloud mindset. You don't just do a lift and shift into and keep your old processes the same. Here they're willing to say, look, we're going to move the documentation to a new site, and we're going to completely reinvent the processes by which we make our documentation. So here, the documentation is going to be in a much more agile process where anyone in the company can just submit their changes. Even the public can submit their changes. Just submit a pull request against the repo. And then we're going to have an automatic pipeline. Large changes go through a human review. Small changes go through straight away. Internally, they had AI and artificial intelligence that would review your changes, comment on the style. How many sentences do you have with over 30 words? Did you capitalize correctly? Azure has a capital A. Azure Portal has a small p. All these style guide rules could be automated. So all this used to be done with human reviews. Now it's automated. You're running this. If I was as a program manager for the Azure DNS service, I could write most of that documentation and self-publish it. I could, they would review a new document with a human review. If there's incremental changes, it could auto-review. Depends on the scope of the changes. They can see, metrics on the quality of the writing and the complexity of the language, clarity of the language, and so on. And people could file bugs, and I could fix them, and we can, continuously improve the documentation. So moving to the cloud-based platform enabled this complete reinvention of the processes, and that enabled a far better documentation experience than existed previously. The documentation is 100 times better than it was, and it's the change in process that enabled that. A cloud-based process enabled far, far better quality and much greater efficiency. It was less work doing it the new way for a much better end result. So that's where the cloud can be very powerful. Okay, time to move on to our third pillar. Let's have a look at this. And this is a bucket I call service quality. And what do I mean here? There's various different things here. So the first item here, performance. Things in the cloud, they tend to work really well. You're running on new hardware, or certainly you should always move to newer, if you're using virtual machines, try and stay on the newer instances. They're just faster. They're just newer and the latest and greatest. So you're not running on legacy hardware. You can run on new hardware, you get great performance. You can have great networking. The networking kit is very fast. Your data center is sitting on a really fat pipe. It's just, things they can run really well on the cloud. You can, as long as you scale things correctly, you can really run with fantastic performance on the cloud. A lot of people, even if they only go as far as lift and shift and the later changes haven't come yet, even with a lift and shift, things tend to run really nice on the cloud. That's a nice start. The other one is scalability. You can have smaller machines, you can have bigger machines, you can have more machines, you can have fewer machines. It's scalable up and down and scalable in and out. You've got this two-dimensional scalability matrix, but also because of the agility, you can just scale so easily. With traditional IT, scale is of course very tough. You have a scale up mentality, which is of course expensive. You scale for peak demand, you can't scale back again during lulls in demand. Whereas with the cloud, of course, you can auto scale up and down. That gives you cost efficiency. You can scale in and out. You don't have to stress up front as to just what spec of server to buy. Just pick one, see how it goes. If you need a bigger one, change it. It's very flexible and highly scalable. So you can really build for build your pilot application for small scale. If it's a roaring success, that's fine. You can just scale it up. You don't have to worry about those 3-year forecasts of what your future customer base is going to be that's trying to then drive your purchasing decisions. You can just adapt to whatever it is, and that will work really, really well. Next item here is reliability. Items in the services in the cloud, they you can set up things to be, well, you can set them up to be very unreliable if you want. If you want to run in a single machine, that's fine. Now, I mean, Azure still has pretty reliable virtual machines. Things do work very, very well in the cloud. They're well maintained. The hardware is of high quality. So in general, the cloud is highly reliable, even if you're on a single machine. But of course, when you have single points of failure, failures do happen from time to time. And you have in the cloud this huge range of opportunities to address your reliability concerns. And if you search for Azure resiliency, you'll find some great documentation on this. They have what you call a resiliency continuum. You say, okay, you go from a single virtual machine going up to machines in availability sets, up to availability zones where things are spread across multiple data centers, going up to multi-region deployments where you're spreading things around the world to be secure against tornadoes and who knows what. So all the way up, you're protecting against different types of failure. Maybe it's just routine hardware failures, or you're protecting against data scale outages, or you're protecting against whole regional disasters. You can defend against whatever your business needs you to defend against. You simply have to choose from this menu of reliability options, and you can achieve what you need to achieve. So you can you have that available. And some of this is very hard to do with traditional IT. If you're looking at setting up a second data center, well, how far is it from your original data center? How do you really make sure you haven't got single points of failure between those? Are they from the same power supplier in your region? Are they using the same ISP? With the cloud, you can really make sure that these questions are all addressed very in a very solid way. And the last one I have in this pillar is security and compliance. So for many years, people have objected to the cloud on security grounds, and they've said, "Oh, it can't be secure putting all this stuff in the cloud." This is control bias. It's like saying it's more secure to keep my money under the mattress than it is to put it in the bank. The cloud, they make enormous investments in security, and that goes from the physical security of the buildings. If you actually get a chance to do an Azure data center tour, I do recommend it. And you can see the physical security there. I've seen the ones here in Dublin. They have it's like a moat or a huge ditch around them. The building, the physical access controls. Don't forget your passport, you won't get in. These are highly secure facilities. And then, of course, you have all the operational security and the security of the code running within the applications, and the security features that are available to you to secure from a networking point of view and an application point of view. There's a huge space here. And again, you have the opportunity to do some of this badly if you don't know what you're doing. Skills are an important piece here, and it's important to make sure that you use the cloud security features in the right way. But fundamentally, you can build highly secure applications in the cloud as long as you do things correctly. It's a shared responsibility model, so you do have some responsibility here. But you can build highly secure applications in the cloud. And this, of course, feeds into this area of compliance. There may be some compliance requirements that are very important for your business. And maybe there's new compliance requirements that are coming into your business because maybe you're expanding into new markets. But with the cloud, you have a platform that has been certified across a huge range of different compliance certifications, and it enables you to build applications of yours that can meet those certifications. Now, you don't get them for free. There's still some hoops to jump through there, and you have to read the fine print a little bit about which cloud services are enabled for which compliance certs, and maybe there's some conditions on how you use those services. But it can be done, and you have an opportunity there to achieve compliance across a wide range of standards more easily, in a more straightforward way than if you were having to do this with your traditional IT and you were having to implement every aspect of those standards for yourself, because a huge amount is being done for you by the cloud provider. So that's a very important piece of the piece in terms of service quality. And there's also advantages there from a business point of view. We talked in the beginning about cost, making like for like comparisons. Compliance can be a very large cost on your business. And with the cloud, it could well be that you're able to automate some of those compliance checks. Think about Azure Policy Compliance Reports, for example. You may be able to drive down your compliance costs if you use the cloud in the right way. And that can be a significant cost saving outside of your pure IT costs. Think about how your compliance costs are being driven, your audit costs and your internal compliance teams, and how they can work more efficiently in cloud if they're doing things in the right way. Okay, and the last one here, the last pillar, new capabilities. There are things you can do in the cloud that you just can't do on premise. Or if you were to try do them, You'd have to make a huge investment in IT. You'd have to hire a room full of PhDs in machine learning or whatever it is, and it would be an incredibly expensive and slow operation to embrace some of these newer technologies. Whereas the cloud democratizes these technologies, and it makes many of these new technologies available as a commodity that you can simply go and consume and pay for what you use. So let's look at some examples. First one, big data scenarios, IoT scenarios, gathering, sensor data from millions of sensors, analyzing big data, whether that's click streams or sensor data or whatever it is. You can do large-scale data analysis in the cloud, which can be very expensive and very difficult to do on-premise. But the cloud is built for big data, and this, it's built on technologies that provide, massive scale. From hyperscale cloud providers managing their own data to some of their largest customers. So you can really take advantage of that and do things in the cloud in a very effective way, giving you new insights from that data, and also potentially cost savings, because when you're analyzing the data, you can scale up, and then when you're not using it, you can scale back down again. Whereas if you do it in traditional IT, there's going to be some idle time that's running there as well. You think about data analytics, there's some very powerful analytics services there. Again, it could be a huge investment to replicate this in your own IT. You simply have access to just much more power in terms of how you do your data analytics when you run it in the cloud and use these commodity services. Think about services like machine learning and AI, cognitive services, natural language processing. You can run your own models, train your own models to provide, intelligence into your applications, for recommendation engines that maybe can drive cross-selling across your shopping carts, for example. There's many, many, many applications for this. And the cloud is really, AI is one of the huge drivers for the cloud. And it's one of the huge changes that's shifting the entire IT industry at the moment. So the cloud is very much the engine behind the AI revolution. And the last one I have here, global reach. If you want to reach out to a global market, you want your applications to be fast. So you're going to be looking at content delivery networks or edge networks to deliver your content in multiple regions. And as you go to those other regions, you're going to need to be thinking about geo-isolation of your data, maybe keeping your US data separate from your European data, thinking about how you achieve compliance in different regions with different standards. This is a lot of work. To build out that global footprint with traditional IT, you're looking at finding local partners in these different regions or setting up satellite offices in these different regions, setting up local operations to manage this. Whereas with the cloud, you have the ability to just click deploy. You can roll out globally. You can use edge networks. You have a huge capacity to expand your services out to global markets and provide a fast, responsive service local to the customer, wherever that customer sits in the world. And that's a huge value prop that the cloud brings. Think back to the dot-com boom. The dot-com boom, was fundamentally built on traditional IT. All these investors pouring money into dot-com companies. A lot of that investment was going into IT, into hardware, into servers that were being run around the world to drive that. Whereas today, if you're setting up a new business, if the dot-com boom was happening now, you'd be doing none of that. You'd just do it all in the cloud. You can just get out to that global customer base. You can scale as you need. It's just a completely different value proposition. So this brings me to the end of this slide. This is really bringing me to the end of this talk, in fact, on the cloud value proposition. Hopefully this has been an interesting discussion for everybody, and you've all found some interesting insights here. As I say, this is a menu. Not everybody benefits from every one of these things, but just be mindful of it. Decide what is it you're trying to get from the cloud. Choose those benefits. Maybe they're going to change over time. The benefits you're looking for today may evolve, and you may be looking to get additional benefits in 2 years' time. Maybe today is about agility. In 2 years' time is when you're thinking about AI. That's an entirely valid scenario. So think about your cloud benefits. Think of your cloud goals, and make sure they're clear and communicated across your organization. So what value do these bring? Well, in some cases, save money. In some cases, these are all about making money. Now, I could argue that the agility helps you save money as well, because you're becoming more efficient. So it's saving and making money on that second pillar. So you can be saving money and you can be making money. And on service quality, you can be reducing your risk. So this is fundamentally what businesses want. When you think about the value proposition for the cloud coming to your business, or if you think if you're a partner selling cloud services and how you position those services with your customers, the value proposition fundamentally breaks down into saving money, making money, and reducing risk. And everything here maps into one of those. So, well, thank you very much. Thank you for listening. I hope you found this talk useful. And we'll see you again on another talk in the future here on skillmeup.com. Recap: for information on instructor-led training, contact sales@opportunity.com. For information on our on-demand services, skillmeup.com, you can start a free trial at skillmeup.com. And for more information about virtual conferences, see govirtualconference.com. Thank you for listening.